Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you're joining us because, well, today we're looking at something pretty unique.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating single source document today. It's titled, What a Boarder Can Learn from Max DePree.
Right, and our mission here is to explore this really unexpected intersection of two completely different worlds.
Totally different worlds, yeah.
We're taking the high-level corporate theories of this respected leadership thinker, Max DePree, and we are applying them directly to the chaotic, loud, everyday reality of life in a student boarding house.
Which is just a brilliant premise. I mean, DePree believed that strong organizations are built on relationships, on trust, and a shared purpose.
And not just rigid hierarchies.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So applying that very human-centric theory to a dorm full of teenagers is kind of the ultimate stress test of his ideas.
It really is. Imagine just for a second trying to run a high-stakes organization where you have incredibly tight schedules, fiercely contested shared resources, and wildly diverse personalities.
Sounds like a typical Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, except your primary stakeholders are a group of sleep-deprived teenagers fueled entirely by instant noodles and academic stress.
And sheer hormonal chaos. Yeah, it honestly sounds like a recipe for absolute disaster. Or, at the very least, a sitcom, where the plot revolves around who left their wet towel on the bathroom floor again.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because the way I'm seeing it, a boarding house is essentially a micro-corporation.
A micro-corporation, I like that.
Right. Think about the structural similarities. Just like a business, it has strict daily schedules, it has shared physical resources.
Like the communal kitchen or the single working printer.
Yeah, or the finite supply of hot water at 7 in the morning.
Right.
And you also have different departments of students, essentially, seniors, freshmen, athletes, the theater kids.
All trying to coexist without the whole system collapsing.
Exactly. So to understand how corporate principles apply here, we first have to tear down what we traditionally think leadership means.
We do. Because usually when we hear the word leadership, especially in a school setting, we think of a title.
Right, the head boy or the prefect.
Yeah, the kid with the shiny enameled badge walking down the hallway. But DePree's core suggestion completely dismantles that. He argues that leadership is absolutely not about status or formal authority.
Wait, not at all.
Not at all. Instead, he defines leadership as taking active responsibility for the well-being and success of others.
Okay, so it's behavioral.
Completely behavioral. In a boarding house, this translates away from formal titles and shifts entirely into small, consistent, daily actions.
Like what kind of actions?
Well, the source mentions things like supporting younger or new students, contributing positively to daily house routines, showing respect in shared physical spaces.
Basically just taking ownership of your own behavior.
Exactly, taking ownership of the choices you make every single day.
Now, I hear that and it sounds beautiful, but I have to push back a little here.
Sure, go ahead.
It's easy to say leadership is about the well-being of others, but isn't it incredibly hard for a teenager to prioritize others when they're just trying to survive high school exams and social pressures? I mean, biologically, they're wired for self-interest at that age.
What's fascinating here is that taking ownership of one's own choices is actually the first step of leadership. DePree's vision is accessible precisely because it doesn't require a teenager to be this perfectly selfless saint.
Right.
You don't have to wait for a title, and you don't have to solve everyone's deep psychological problems. You just practice it daily.
I think I need a tangible example of that. How does a hormone-driven teenager actually do this on a random Tuesday night?
Okay, let's say a student finishes a late-night snack in the common room. Their biological impulse, driven by exhaustion, is to just leave the wrappers on the table and go straight to bed.
Right, immediate comfort.
Exactly. But overriding that impulse simply means putting the wrappers in the bin or managing your time so you aren't frantically asking your roommate for help at 2 in the morning before a major exam.
So you don't have to save the world. You just have to make sure you aren't actively making life harder for everyone else.
Precisely. You start by not being the problem. And if leadership is defined by those small, consistent actions, the immediate byproduct of those actions is trust.
Which naturally builds a sense of belonging. We're moving from the individual to the group dynamic now.
Yeah, and trust was everything to Max DePree. He emphasized that trust is the absolute foundation of any successful community.
Because without it, cooperation is just too difficult, right?
It becomes almost impossible. Relationships turn fragile. Every interaction becomes this high-friction negotiation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I've been thinking about trust in a shared living space, and it is exactly like the Wi-Fi.
The Wi-Fi, how so?
Well, it's totally invisible, right? When the Wi-Fi is strong, you just go about your day streaming shows, doing work, totally unaware of it.
You don't even think about the router.
Exactly. But the absolute second it drops, nothing works. Cooperation grinds to a total halt, and everyone gets incredibly frustrated.
That is a perfect analogy. Social trust works the exact same way, and borders build that invisible Wi-Fi gradually through reliability and integrity.
Like speaking honestly and respectfully to each other.
Yeah, and following agreed expectations,
And keeping count.
keeping commitments they make to their peers and staff, just offering support during challenging times.
And when you have that trust, you naturally build that sense of belonging.
Right. DePree believed leaders create environments where people feel valued and included. And crucially, in a boarding house, this isn't just the staff's job.
The students actually shape the culture.
They absolutely do. They contribute to belonging by actively including others in social and academic activities.
Just showing basic kindness and patience.
Showing patience, maintaining awareness of how their personal behavior impacts the group, and celebrating differences rather than criticizing them.
Which has to have a massive impact on the kids themselves.
Oh, massive. The result is that a strong sense of belonging directly improves the students' confidence, their well-being, and their overall motivation.
Because their brain isn't constantly scanning the room for social threats.
Exactly. They feel safe.
But, a sense of belonging sounds really warm and fuzzy. But a functioning community can't just be a free-for-all, right?
No, definitely not.
True belonging actually requires structure, which transitions us to how DePree balances all this warmth with high standards.
This is a crucial part of his philosophy. DePree recognized that clear expectations are vital. People simply perform better when they know exactly what is expected of them.
Because ambiguity just breeds anxiety.
It really does. So in a boarding house, clarity means following study routines, maintaining organizational habits, and respecting shared rules and schedules.
And that clarity directly helps students develop self-discipline and independence.
Yes, but the genius of DePree's approach is that effective leadership combines that structural clarity with genuine care.
So it's care plus standards?
Exactly. Boarders demonstrate this balance by encouraging peers to meet their commitments, but doing it by offering help without judgment.
They reflect on mistakes to learn from them rather than using them to punish each other.
Right. They recognize that everyone is developing at a different pace. Communities are strongest when members hold each other to high standards, but in strictly positive ways.
Okay, but how does a student actually hold a peer accountable to these high standards without sounding like a completely insufferable hall monitor or a nag?
That is the ultimate psychological tightrope walk for a teenager.
Right, because in high school, social currency is everything. If you start lecturing your roommate about quiet hours, you are going to be ostracized by Tuesday.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanism we're talking about here is really high-level conflict resolution. Offering help without judgment is the key.
How does that look in practice, though? Let's say a roommate is blasting loud music during study hours.
Well, accountability in DePree's view isn't about punishment. It's about shared growth. So instead of pointing a punitive finger and saying, turn that off or I'm reporting you.
Which just triggers defensiveness.
Exactly. Instead, you separate the person from the problem. You might say, hey, I have a massive history paper due. I know you study best with music, but could you use headphones tonight?
Wow, yeah. That completely shifts the dynamic.
It preserves the relationship while still enforcing the boundary. And when teenagers learn to do that, they are actually practicing the exact same emotional intelligence needed in corporate boardrooms.
Which brings us to the long-term stakes of all this. Zooming out from the specific rules of the boarding house, this has a lifelong impact on you, the listener.
Absolutely. Boarding houses aren't just for academic knowledge. They are active incubators for social responsibility.
Because realistically, no employer cares if you knew how to perfectly fold your bed sheets when you were 16.
No, but they care deeply if you grasp trust, belonging, and shared purpose. When students internalize those concepts, they build meaningful friendships.
They develop confidence in groups.
Yeah, they contribute to positive cultures, and they're ultimately prepared for future leadership roles. These skills remain incredibly valuable long after school ends.
So what does this all mean?
It means the final thought from the text is, true leadership is not something you wait for. It is actively practiced every day through your attitudes and actions.
By caring for others and taking responsibility for your environment. So whether you are running a massive corporate boardroom right now or you're just sharing a kitchen with some messy roommates, Leadership is a daily practice, not a destination.
The framework is entirely scalable. And if we consider that these young boarding school students are actively practicing Max DePree's corporate principles long before they ever enter the workforce, it raises a fascinating question for you.
What's that?
Well, how might treating every shared living situation you are in, from a college dorm to a family home, or even a shared neighborhood, as a daily incubator for executive leadership, fundamentally change the way you interact with people under your roof tomorrow morning?